Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, your home for Pittsburgh Penguins news and analysis. You can find us on YouTube at Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff, or you can catch us anywhere you get your podcast from. I'm your host, Nick Belsky, joined as always by Nick Horwat, and we begin what could already be described as an important week for the Pittsburgh Penguins, because when you start to lose 5 straight games in a row, 10 games into the season, you need to start kind of turning the tide quickly, or else you're going to fall behind the 8 ball. But what we're going to discuss today is not as much that as it is this the new normal for the Pittsburgh Penguins? Should we just be expecting long losing streaks? And why, over the past 3 years, it's kind of showed us that you kind of should. Then we'll have an injury update on the top Penguins forward, as he might be out for an extended period. We do not know, but we'll discuss that a little bit later. Also, the Penguins getting desperate to get Sidney Crosby back on track. We'll tell you why we think so. And then we'll close things out talking Marc-Andre Fleury on the day of his Pittsburgh finale. Got a lot to get to in this episode, Horwat. Let's get started. And let's kick things off with, the state of the Pittsburgh Penguins right now, which is not great. It's not. They are winless on their 4-game road trip, going 0-3-1, getting just the pity point out of the Calgary Flames game. They're now losers of 5 straight games, outscored 22-10 in those performances. I guess the simple way to start this is, what are your thoughts on this stretch for the Penguins, and is it as bad as it seems?
Do you need any more thoughts on this stretch than, boy, that was bad? And is it as bad as it seems? It feels like it. It's definitely getting there. This is the team that... This is how everyone looked at the Penguins the last 2 years without really digging into, at least at the time, that the team is still winning. This is kind of what everyone said the team was, and now it's just here. And now it is the old core isn't producing. Evgeni Malkin got off to a hot start. Yeah, I mean, does he have 12 points now, or like what?
Yeah, he had
honestly,
3 on Saturday, which is why he has, I believe, 14 points now. But I mean, he did go scoreless for the majority of that road trip and was kind of a disappearing act.
Yeah, in which, when you come off of a 11 points in 4 games or whatever it was to start the year, okay, and it's Evgeni Malkin. There's going to be a game or two taken off because that's what he's always done. But it seemed to linger on for a bit more than just a game or two. And yeah, he got 3 in the one game, but it just didn't feel like it, right? Everything sort of felt like it was taken away because of how awful everything has been around him. I mean, Sidney Crosby hasn't gotten jump-started or kick-started, which we'll get into. Yeah, 4-game, at least a 4-game pointless streak here that I'm finally finding. Brutal. And then just it's been hard to watch. Also, I think that's been a big part of it because you're almost expecting... I mean, they kept up with Edmonton in the first period somehow. Oh, wait, I know how. Goaltending.
Yeah.
And that was it. And then falling behind to another multi-goal loss to Edmonton and not being able to score. You run out of words. You run out of words with the team.
Yeah, and I think the problem with it is they were non-competitive in the latter half of those games, right? The Flames game, they were on... They had their game against the Flames, and then they shut down late, and they gave up that goal with the last minute. The Jets game, I'll say they looked pretty good, and then the Jets just kind of pulled away late, and that's what good teams do. But if you go to that Edmonton game, I mean, you gave up 50 shots on goal, and you really didn't test Stuart Skinner very much on the other end of things. And then especially that Canucks game, like the Oilers game, I get it. Like, you were kept in it by Yoel Blomqvist, but you really never had much going for you in that game. But the Canucks game, they get a 2-goal lead and then they give up 4 unanswered. That's fine. You're halfway through the game though. Like, you should still, with just a 2-goal deficit, knowing that you've had your game at some point that night, be able to put a pushback on. And they didn't. Like, yeah, the last 5 minutes of the game, Malkin scored a goal. They came within 1. But for most of that second half of the game, when they were only down by 2 goals, it was lifeless. And that's not good. That's uninspired hockey. And that's what leads to these long losing streaks. And that's what leads to, a losing culture beginning to spread in Pittsburgh. And I texted you and I said, is this the new normal for the Penguins, that they just are going to lose 3+ games on a consistent basis. They're going to lose 5+ games, and it's not going to be surprising anymore when it happens. I mean, they have 12 losing streaks of 3+ games in the last 3 seasons. Combine the previous 3 seasons, they only had 7. We're 10 games into this year. We still have 72 games remaining this season, and they're almost, I mean, you'd have to imagine they're going to double it from the, 2020 to 2022 versus, 2022 to now. They're going to double their 3-game losing streaks. And then when you look at the 5+ gamers, they have now 3 losing streaks of 5+ games over the last 3 seasons compared to only 1 in the previous 3. Again, we're only 10 games in. This number could get much worse because this team feels like it's just equipped to allow that to happen. If their stars aren't going, which for a large portion of this losing streak, they haven't been. Crosby has only had 1 game this year that we can look at and say, yeah, that was a Sidney Crosby-esque performance. Meanwhile, Evgeni Malkin, outside of that 3-point performance on Saturday, those are the only points he scored in the past 5 games. It feels like if they're not going, and I don't even need to get into Kris Letang and Erik Karlsson, they have both been, I would say net negative, but I feel like that's too much of propping them up. They've been really bad this entire season. It feels like this team is just equipped to go on long losing streaks more regularly than it ever has been.
They really are. It has been just the, Evgeni Malkin, aside from those 3 points, hasn't looked there. He's looked absent. Sidney Crosby, like we said, and that game was against Buffalo, and even that wasn't the greatest performance team wise. I mean, and of course you don't want to bring up just how bad Kris Letang looks, how bad Erik Karlsson looks. Marcus Pettersson doesn't look great. Michael Bunting's been healthy scratched. Has there been a standout? Tristan Jarry's in the minors right now.
Yeah.
There hasn't been a player on this team, aside from Evgeni Malkin, for the first week, and that's really it, that you can point to and say, here's some light. Brian Rust is hurt again. There goes that one, because he seemed to have at least something going for him.
Mm-hmm.
Valtteri Pusin hasn't been in the lineup. Jesse Puljujarvi for a minute seemed like he could be that shining light. Hard to do in the bottom 6, to be honest.
There's Kevin
Hayes and Lars Eller have been small ones, yeah.
Yeah, but there's been small ones, but here's the thing. If your stars, and again, we'll get into the star conversation later with Crosby. If your stars aren't performing to, at the very least, a base level of expectation, then all those little things are not going to be enough to overcome all these big issues, right? Yeah. Team defense, I mean, they've allowed 3+ goals in each of the first 10 games of the season. That is the first time they've done that since 2005, 2006. That's Crosby's rookie year.
Oh,
do we remember how bad of a year that ended up being? That's what we're looking at right now as far as starts for the Penguins defense-wise. And then the fact is, at least that year, you had Sidney Crosby going up over 100 points. Right now, he has 3 points at 5-on-5. So, like you mentioned, there's a couple of small little glimmers of hope and glimmers of good hockey, right? Lars Eller, Kevin Hayes, Joel Blomqvist, Alex Nedeljkovic in every first period that he plays. I would say you'd probably put that there, but as a team, as a whole, it's just not good. And again, is it becoming the new normal? Yes. 12 losing streaks of 3+ games over the last 3 seasons. If you look at their winning streaks, it doesn't compare. It just doesn't.
No, not at all. It's those little highlights of the Lars Eller, of the Kevin Hayes. They can't carry a team. They're there to be the supporting cast, and that's what they're doing. They're being the supporting cast. Listen, I get that a lot of Twitter has been accepting of the Penguins' fate for a couple years now.
Yeah.
Another lot of Twitter has not. It's getting time to, like we're talking about here, just pretty much accept the position they're in and call it in, at least for the year, and see if maybe there's a new commitment into next season. With the final years of the core, you're going to take it a year at a time, and it might still be too early to call it in on this year. We are only 10 games in.
Yeah.
But this trend can't continue unless they find a wake-up call of sorts, because the wake-up call for Michael Bunting didn't work. So it's going to be a tough road forward, and it might just be forcing everyone to accept the path that they're on.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to wait and see how this goes. And by no means am I saying, it's all over, like pack it in. But I am saying that we thought the bottom was a bubble playoff team this year. The bottom is much lower because it feels like they are prone now to going on these long losing streaks. And that is a quick way to find yourself out of a playoff position. Before we continue, just want to quickly remind everybody that we are proud to partner with the Rangers Ed podcast and Little Ed's Workshop to raise money for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. We got 1 week left, so we're going to continue to hammer this home for the remainder of October. Head on over to the link in the description below to check out our men's and women's t-shirt selections, as well as a small selection of hoodies. 100% of the profits for these shirts will be donated directly to breast cancer research and breast cancer awareness. So for the rest of October, go check out your Tip of the Ice-Burgh Hockey Fights Cancer shirts. Let's continue this with some bad news, obviously. Bryan Rust went down in that final game of the road trip, left Saturday's game in the third period with a lower body injury after a collision with Nils Höglander. He was visibly aggravated after the play, slamming his stick, yelling at Höglander or maybe the referee because he thought it should have been a penalty. It kind of looked like a weird, almost knee-to-knee situation, but he was just pinched up against the boards in a tough spot. Mike Sullivan says yesterday after practice that Rust is still being evaluated. He obviously missed practice due to that fact. And let's also not forget, he missed the first 2 games of the season with a lower body injury. So who knows, maybe this is a re-aggravation of that injury or if it's just a new injury, but it certainly didn't look good when he went down on Saturday night.
No, it didn't. It was, I didn't look into any further replays. I just kind of saw the initial play, the initial replay, and then the amount of yelling Bryan Rust was doing. It's, like I said, he was one of the bright spots of the top 6 to kind of start the year, even if he was injured for the first couple. Came in, got a couple of goals, and now who knows how long he'll be out for. The fact that they're still evaluating, essentially, and still looking for updates heading into after a couple of days, not ideal. Not ideal for someone of that caliber with someone who has that ability, and not ideal for someone who's coming off of a lower body injury already.
Yeah.
So we'll see where it goes. I don't have high expectations at this point. Like we just discussed, I don't have high expectations for a lot of things for this Penguins team this year, whether it be pure skill, success, or just luck. It just seems like everything is kind of falling against them, and that does include some injury luck.
Yeah. Now, if he is gone for an extended period of time, again, Mike Sullivan said still being evaluated. We're not sure what the timetable is for Bryan Rust. You'd have to imagine if he missed practice yesterday and he was still being evaluated that he's at the very least not going to be good to go tonight against the Minnesota Wild. But if he is out for an extended period, how big of a loss is Bryan Rust to this Penguins lineup?
Massive. I mean, just massive. We just got done talking. He's 3 goals and an assist for 4 points in 8 games. I mean, 3 goals is second most on the team. I mean, with a bunch of other people who have 3, but the most is 4. So it's not like this team's scoring in bunches. Averaging 3 goals a game, 30 goals in 10 games. But he was supposed to be, especially coming into the season without Jake Gensel, going to be playing alongside Sidney Crosby. He was supposed to be one that kind of carried a bit more of the load for goal scoring. And we're just not seeing it. We're not seeing the from the rest of the team. And now we won't see it. I forget where I was going, but we won't see it from him if he's hurt. And that's just what makes it such a big blow to this team, who still fancy themselves as contenders, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, listen, when you have Crosby and Malkin, you're hoping they snap out of it and they can carry you back into a spot, but it's getting late early for them. And if you lose Bryan Rust for an extended period of time, he did have 3 goals in 8 games. He is on pace for, checks notes, 31 goals. He's always on pace for 30 plus goals. The problem is he struggles to stay healthy. That's always been the question with Bryan Rust. Can he stay healthy for that full season? If he can, he's a 30 goal scorer. When he's in the lineup, he's always great when healthy, right? That's what we always say about him. Oh man, Bryan Rust, he is great if he can stay healthy. That's a big if now. Like, obviously you're getting older, injuries become a little easier to accrue. And now you're seeing him for the second time this season. We're only 10 games in, getting put on the shelf, right? I mean, the Penguins haven't gotten enough out of the top line. That is just a plain fact of life. And losing him only makes that worse. I understand we're going to talk about what the Penguins are going to do to counteract that, or at least what it looks like they might do to counteract that based on yesterday's line rushes in practice. But losing Bryan Rust for an extended period of time, we talked about losing streaks in the first segment. That's going to open you up to a lot of opportunity for losing streaks, because Bryan Rust, creates a lot in that top six as well. He was one of the most unlucky players in the first couple of games that he played because he was getting chances, just not finishing. The puck started to go back in the back of the net. And then, of course, this happens and he goes down with a leg injury.
Yeah, just all the way around less than ideal. It was a bright spot, and now just wait and see, I guess. I mean,
yeah.
He is normally, if I remember correctly, normally one that will participate in morning skates. I mean, I know most of the team doesn't, but I believe he is one that usually would. So we'll see if he appears at, you do it in Cranberry this year. We'll see if he appears at Cranberry this morning. And, just hope for the best. Hope, if anything, it's nothing serious and nothing long-term, and maybe there's still a fighting chance for this team.
Yeah, and you definitely don't want to lose him through the month of November because that's when he gets his superpowers, right? He shaves in the rustache, and that's usually one of his best months. He just goes off. So you need to have him, and you need to have him to have that kind of month because the Penguins are falling behind the 8-ball. Let's move on over and talk about how they're going to respond to the loss of Bryan Rust, or at the very least, how it seems like they may. Sidney Crosby has 7 points in his first 10 games. And on the surface, you look at that and say, okay, slightly slow start. But he only has 3 points at even strength at 5-on-5. He's been outchanced by a lot. He's been outscored 11-6 when on the ice at 5-on-5. So to counteract the fact that he potentially loses Bryan Rust, Mike Sullivan yesterday at practice put Evgeni Malkin on Sidney Crosby's left wing, Rickard Rakell on Sidney Crosby's right wing, and said, we're going to go full-on desperation mode to try to get number 87 kickstarted in this season. I mean, it used to be reserved when it comes to Malkin with Crosby for desperation situations in games, right? Whenever your offense is not giving you anything, you're down by a couple goals, you need a spark. Fine. Let's put the two-headed monster out there because really nothing else is working. That's what it used to be, sparingly used by Mike Sullivan. We've seen it much more often this year. We saw it in the first game of the season when the Penguins lost 6-0 to the Rangers. We've seen it post power play opportunities, penalty kill opportunities. Whenever they go out there for that first shift, it's usually been Crosby, Malkin, whether that be Rakell, Rust, O'Connor, somebody else. But the two-headed monster has been out there together. Seeing them put those two together in a practice and potentially seeing them line up those two together to start a game, it makes me wonder how desperate this team is to get Crosby going. We talked about the importance of it, but is Mike Sullivan in a desperation situation to get Sidney Crosby going right now?
It sure seems like it. This is a theory that they've thought of for the last couple of seasons anyway. It's a theory that's kind of been floated around, for a bit, just kind of one of those late career Lemieux moves where it's someone's get one of the stars moved to the wing and see if stacking the lineup, essentially, not so much to, at the time at least, not to wake people up, but just to stack the lineup and see if that brings something together quite nicely. And this is, in a way, A, stacking up the lineup, but also B, again, trying to wake up Sidney Crosby and also maybe trying to get Evgeni Malkin back on his horse. Yeah, 3 points in the last game, including a really nice goal that lucky he didn't get hurt on, by the way. I didn't even bring that part up. But maybe trying to get them both to wake up. Maybe this becomes not necessarily becomes a one-line team, but you have that one line that you focus on and then pray to God the bottom six helps itself. It's a fascinating decision. I don't totally hate it, especially because it does feel like that late Lemieux move. If you look at it in a vacuum, oh, okay, cool. We're stacking up the lineup, something that these two can do, and because they've never really done it before, aside from random spurts and power plays. Being full game 5-on-5 with those two. I mean, first, how do you defend against that? Aside from the fact that they're old now, so it's kind of easy. But see what you can do. It's gonna give a nice little shot in the arm to the forward core as a whole, especially if Bryan Rust is hurt and they kind of need to stack that lineup. See how it performs. I don't totally hate it whatsoever, and it makes it into a bit of an all-star team, a bit of an EA Sports NHL lineup, but sometimes it's what you have to do. And when you're getting desperate like the Penguins are right now because they still want to win and still want to be contenders, it's just something you got to try.
Yeah, I agree. This is becoming a desperation situation, right? I mean, this team goes nowhere with Sidney Crosby performing the way that he has. And again, 7 points in 10 games on the surface is not bad, but you look at how bad he's been defensively. You look at how bad he's been at 5-on-5. You look at how little he is creating and just kind of the eye test of it all. You're going nowhere with Sid like this. And in fact, you're probably getting a top 5 draft pick if Sidney Crosby plays like this over 82 games. Do I expect that to persist? No, I don't think he's going to fall off a cliff. I think he's too good for that. So I think that he would bounce back. As far as this being the way that you try to do it, I don't like the thought of keeping Malkin with Crosby over an extended period of time, but if you're trying to do it for 2 games to wake something up, fine, sure, I guess. It'll be interesting tonight to see those two if they end up on a line together for the entire game, which, I mean, these lines that Mike Sullivan trots out there and throws on the graphic at the beginning of the game, I think you can count on one hand the amount of times that they've actually persisted throughout the entire 60 minutes. He shuffles lines very, very quickly this season. So I would expect that if this starts and doesn't go well, that they're gonna quickly kind of scrap that idea. But the reason I don't like it, look at the rest of the lineup.
No
It's
kidding.
not top 6, bottom 6. It is top line, bottom 9. That's what you're looking at with the Penguins if they end up doing that, because it looks like Beauvillier, Hayes, Puljujärvi is on a line together. And I mean, all of the media outlets, I got this from Penn's Inside Scoop, have that as your second line. I don't know if, I mean, you can argue it because all 3 of these lines are kind of similar. O'Connor, Eller, and Nola Chari, Michael Bunting, Cody Glass, and Valtteri Puustinen, which is a fun preseason line, but I'm not sure how good that's going to work in the regular season. So the reason I don't like keeping this as a duo for more than this homestand is because I look at that bottom 9 and I say, while some of these players have performed well this season, I think putting this as your bottom 9 is not something that's going to lead to much success.
If it is worth anything, that last line of Bunting, Glass, Puustinen has potential.
Again, it's a nice preseason line.
It's a nice preseason line, but we saw what Puustinen did last year, which was pretty good. He proved that he is an NHLer. We know Michael Bunting can be better. It's a matter of getting there.
Yeah.
And Cody Glass is a bit of an experiment right now, but he's been impressive in his short tenure so far.
Yeah.
So that line in itself has potential. And, you know, I get that it's listed as the 4th line right now. If it does something good in their limited minutes in the first go around against Minnesota, maybe that still stays as the 4th line, but maybe gets a few extra minutes, in the following game. At the same time, I'm already picturing, because it's the Penguins and just because nonsense happens all the time, I'm already picturing a 5-on-5 goal scored by Sidney Crosby, assisted by Malkin and Letang on Marc-Andre Fleury for the game winner. Just because,
for the game winner, you had me until the game winner. I mean, they would have to win the game for that to happen, and I just, oof.
Right, yeah, but Fleury notoriously doesn't play great against the Penguins in Pittsburgh, especially.
Yeah.
So he has a couple of wins, but just in Pittsburgh, it hasn't been the same. So maybe if the Penguins can get an emotional Marc-Andre Fleury, maybe there's something to be had there. And it's meanwhile, we'll get into it. It's already been a heck of an emotional couple of days for Fleury, and I've never seen anything like this.
Yeah, for an opposing player to come in and for it to be like this, it's obviously we'll get to the flurry of it all in just a few minutes. But, we always joke about the Seattle Kraken and the way that they built their team right out of expansion as, hey, this is just a team of second lines, right? This is a forward core of just second lines. Well, this is a Penguins team of 1 first line and 3 third lines.
Being generous, yes.
Being generous, 3 third lines, and they're not the best third lines, right? You're looking at Seattle and saying, yeah, it's a third line, but, Jared McCann is a 40-goal scorer now. I mean, Jordan Eberle is always a 20-plus goal scorer, seemingly. If you're looking at the Penguins, you're like, yeah, we have no room to talk anymore because we are a first line and 3 third to 4th lines. And you can make the argument either way. So we'll see if that's what they end up doing. I think it'll be very intriguing if they end up doing that, going out with Malkin and Crosby. I like the thought of Rickard Rakell with Crosby. I think that is something that is less drastic, but could kickstart Crosby. But I mean, credit to Mike Sullivan for noticing, hey, this is getting bad early. We need to put a stop to it right now, and you need to get into desperation mode. And that's where they're at with Sidney Crosby. That's where they're at with the Penguins, because, I mean, you lost 5. We talked about it last week, if you lose 6 in a row, lose 7 in a row, it's going to be really hard to dig yourself out in this Eastern Conference with a bunch of teams that there are really no bottom feeders, right? There aren't any. I mean, Philadelphia looks like they were supposed to look last year, but Columbus has more wins than the Penguins right now, if I'm not mistaken.
They're in the playoff spot.
You're looking at the Atlantic Division as a bunch of teams that, maybe make that jump and get to the playoffs. There's no bottom feeders. So if you start losing a lot of games, you're going to become the bottom feeder. And that's where the Pittsburgh Penguins are in danger of becoming. Before we continue, we mentioned the Penguins take on the Wild later this evening. We will be live with a Tip of the Ice-Burgh watch along as part of Watch Along Week here at Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Tonight's game against the Minnesota Wild, as well as Thursday night's game against the Anaheim Ducks, we will be live on YouTube at Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Streams begin at 7 p.m. We'll continue throughout the entirety of the game. I'm hoping they go a little bit better than the first time we did a watch along this year. That 6-0 loss on opening night. But we got 2 chances, Horwat. We got 2 chances this week to get it right. Pens Wild tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern, and then Penguins versus the Black and Orange Anaheim Ducks on Halloween this Thursday again at 7 p.m. So come, hang out, toss some questions in, join in the conversation, and let's hope to watch 2 Pittsburgh Penguins victories. Let's close out this show the only way we could close out a show on Marc-Andre Fleury Day in Pittsburgh, and that's by talking about Marc-Andre Fleury. I mean, he leads the 5-1-2 Wild into Pittsburgh. Fleury has been the backup in Minnesota this year. 1-0-1, 2.89 goals against average, a .900 save percentage. It's backup goaltender numbers. And in his 21st and final season, that's kind of what you would expect, right? Goaltenders typically don't last until their 40s. So Marc-Andre Fleury comes in playing at a decent level. This is his final trip to Pittsburgh. I think everybody with eyes and ears is aware of that. 13 years in a Penguins sweater, 375 wins, which is good for first in franchise history. 44 shutouts, which is good for first in franchise history, and a three-time Stanley Cup champion. So what we're going to do to close out this show is give you, in our opinion, the top 3 moments of Marc-Andre Fleury's Pittsburgh Penguins career. We'll bounce back and forth, given one each of us until we unveil our top 3. And I'm sure some of these are going to be the same. Horwat, let's start with number 3. What is number 3 on your list for the best moments of Marc-Andre Fleury?
Doesn't help that a couple of mine are various moments, but the first thing I came up with were the multiple saves on Alex Ovechkin in the playoffs. I think we can all think of a couple right off the top of our head. Those are the ones I'm talking about. Because you can't take away a 3-time Stanley Cup champion from him. A lot of people try to with that 16 run. Do as you will. His name's on the cup. He was a great goaltender in the regular season. So give it up. He's a 3-time Cup champion. And especially in 09 and 17 was a huge piece of the playoff push and of the playoff run. So important for those little moments to get on there. And I think everyone thinks of those saves on Ovechkin specifically just because of how much they meant to the run as a whole.
Yeah, Game 7 in 2009 and then Game 7 once again in 2017. And that's where I'm actually going to go with my number 2 one. So I'll bounce to 2 and then I'll hit my 3 again, because that is my number 2 moment of Marc-Andre Fleury's career. His Game 7 performance against the Caps, not in 2009, but in 2017. It was huge in 2009 as well, don't get me wrong, but a 29 save shutout in Game 7 in Washington against that Capitals team. It's kind of like Big Ben. It wasn't his final game, and even it wasn't his final shutout in a Penguins uniform. He got one of those in the Eastern Conference Final, but it was his parting gift to the organization. That type of performance in that type of scale, in that type of moment against that type of opponent. That was a game in which Marc-Andre Fleury bid farewell to the Pittsburgh Penguins with that type of performance. So I have that as my number 2 moment. Listen, Game 7 in 2009, equally as huge. That glove save on the breakaway was massive. That performance was masterful. But I think because of the meaning of that game in 2017, kind of the last great hurrah for Marc-Andre Fleury in a Penguins uniform, I'm going to give that one at number 2, which, again, out of order here a little bit, but my number 3 is his shootout save against Daniel Alfredsson. I could have gone a couple of different ways with this one, but that shootout save against Alfredsson, I believe in 2014, he goes for the poke check. Alfredsson pulls it back because, well, he is a Hall of Famer and knew that was coming. Goes to the backhand, doesn't elevate for some reason, and Fleury just windmill, puts the glove on the ice and pins it up against the post. One of the most miraculous saves I think you're ever going to see. I could have gone with his save on Erik Karlsson when he flew across the crease and made the glove save falling to the ice, but I'm going to go with his shootout save on Alfredsson. One, because it was crazy, and two, because those early Crosby era teams, Alfredsson was a pest for them, and to see Fleury get Alfredsson on that one, even though he was on the Red Wings at that point, to see him get Alfredsson back on that one, it made me feel good inside.
There's a couple of really good miraculous saves he would make because of his style of play. Just sprawling, just wild, just Dominic Hasek, but honed in a little, and definitely didn't make as many saves. But that was certainly one of the big ones. And I think of when it comes to the shootouts, you think of that one. I also think randomly of the one against the Rangers where he made the save. But I think it was against Kreider, where the rebound hit off Kreider's stick again and in, but it was so quick that the Rangers thought they won and were literally leaving the ice.
Yeah,
when the officials had to pull them back out just for the Penguins to win. Hilarious moment. I believe, I believe that was during one of the Cup years too, to make things even funnier. But I remember that one specifically as well. And I mean, shootouts aren't a fun part of the game anymore, but Fleury made them fun for the goalie side of things on a couple of occasions in his day.
Yeah, back when the shootout wasn't played out like it is today. But
okay.
But that was my number 3. Again, my number 2 was the Game 7 performance against the Caps in 2017. Horwat, what is your number 2 moment of Marc-Andre Fleury's Penguins career?
Again, this is another one that's it's a couple of moments. It's happened a couple of times. Him trying to fight, and one of those times didn't even happen in Pittsburgh. There's a whole list of moments you could pick for Fleury, not even in Pittsburgh, which is him trying to fight. He's always wanted to. I believe it was against Montreal whenever he tried to do it with the Penguins. And then against Jordan Binnington, whenever he was with Minnesota. And both times, people just didn't let him do it, which sucks. Let the man have his fun, especially now. He's old. Who cares?
Yeah, with Binnington, would have been interesting. Binnington is a hothead, but I'm not sure how good he is when he drops the gloves. The one in Pittsburgh, the referee saved his life.
Yes.
I mean, he was going out and trying to scrap with Peter Budaj, who, if you don't know, Peter Budaj, I'm pretty sure they said black belt in jiu-jitsu or something like that. Peter Budaj would have wrecked Marc-Andre Fleury. So I'm very happy that they didn't let him do that. I mean, you could kind of go transversely in when Marc-Andre Fleury got part of a shutout when Brent Johnson fought Rick DiPietro back in the day. So, I mean, a lot of fighting surrounding Marc-Andre Fleury. The two things he has yet to accomplish in his 21 years as an NHL goaltender: fight, goalie goal. One's happened in Pittsburgh, and now Philip Gustafsson had one in Minnesota earlier this season with Fleury sitting there on the bench.
He keeps watching his teammates do it, and he keeps watching his teammates get in fights too. His goalie teammates get in fights. I believe that happened as well somewhere. And if I'm not mistaken, didn't a goalie goal happen against him, or am I just now completely making things up?
See, that I don't remember.
All right.
It might have been in the last, 8 years since he left the Penguins, but I don't remember a goalie goal against him.
Yeah, if anything, if I'm speaking out of turn, which is extremely possible because I didn't look into it, he's watching all these things happen, and he's yet to be a part of it. But so be it. He'll have his moment in the Hall of Fame soon enough. And moving on to the number 1 spot, I just gonna jump into it because I have one that's definitely thought of less, especially now with revisionist history. But it was an awesome moment that I really enjoyed when it happened, and I've never forgotten it. But it was him passing the cup to Matt Murray after the 17 victory. At the time, it did look like and did feel like the passing of the torch in Pittsburgh. Everyone knew at the time Fleury was gone. Everyone knew that it was going to be Murray's crease for, what was supposed to be a good long while. And at the time, it was just one of those cool moments of he looked, you can tell Fleury looked for him. You could tell Fleury looked for Matt Murray on the ice, and went to him and gave him the Stanley Cup for that moment of passing the torch for goaltending in Pittsburgh. Again, revisionist history, brutal look, but at the time, in a vacuum, I had goosebumps when it happened.
Yeah, everybody obviously had great things to say about the way that Fleury handled kind of losing his job, the job that he had for a decade plus since being drafted first overall back in the 2003 draft, but he handled it well. He handled it as good as anybody could handle it. And he left on the best term possible, winning a Stanley Cup and kind of handing it over to the guy that took his job. So yeah, revisionist history, you look back on it and you say, man, Fleury stayed in the league longer than Matt Murray did. Essentially, that's tough. I mean, Murray could still get in the league, but Murray's, I think, a 3 or a 4 at this point.
It'll take some work.
But obviously, a big moment in Fleury's career, and one that certainly people are going to look back on and kind of show as an example as to the type of teammate he was, not as much as the type of player. But I'm going with the save. I mean, I can't go anywhere else. I was like, okay, this is my list. It doesn't matter. And I was like, you know what? It doesn't matter if it's my list or anybody's list. The save on Nicklas Lidstrom, 2009 Stanley Cup final, Game 7, 2-1 lead. Max Talbot, who's in the town right now, scores 2 goals, and the time is ticking off the clock. Not only does he make a save, not only does he make a sprawling save, but he makes it on one of the greatest, if not the greatest defenseman of all time. Some people are on either side of that. I would go Bobby Orr, but some people make the argument for Nick Lidstrom. But to make that save on Lidstrom in 2009, the most iconic moment, I feel like, of his career, that snapshot, that image is the one image that is going to last forever for Marc-Andre Fleury. So I think that, to me, that is undoubtedly the top moment of his Hall of Fame career.
Yeah, whenever I know Fleury's already had his, his welcome back video, his this, that, the other. Whatever they do at PPG Paints Arena tonight, that save will be brought up a couple of times. So that's, if they do another video tribute, if they're doing another gift, even though they did all of it last season too, which makes this hilarious. That will be a big part of it. It's already been a big part of Fleury's A, career, B, just legacy, and C, just every time he comes back to Pittsburgh, it's that replay. It's that replay. It's that replay. To the point where I look at it and go, okay, I got it.
Yeah, I mean, it's
one of those moments. Yeah,
it's literally painted onto PPG Paints Arena.
Yeah, it's one of those moments where after a while you go, okay, we got it, we get it. But it's one of those reasons. It is his free bird, essentially. It's okay, we got it, but we know why we got it.
Yeah,
I say that with Leonard Skinner hanging behind me. Did not mean that. That's hilarious.
You planned it. You planned this all out. You've been waiting for 37 minutes and 30 seconds to be like, I'm going to make a Freebird reference with Marc-Andre Fleury, and that's why I put Leonard Skinner on the wall behind me. I know you've been waiting for it, but let's play the hits as far as, talking about Marc-Andre Fleury. Close this out. Do you think his jersey gets retired in Pittsburgh when it's all said and done?
It should. I mean, I do believe it should. It's going to be Crosby, Malkin, obviously. People want to argue Letang. No, he's getting his number retired too. Let's not try and fight this. And when it comes down to it, because of the standard he set for goaltending in Pittsburgh, yes, absolutely, Marc-Andre Fleury should as well.
I've been back and forth on this issue a lot, but I think this is my final stance. No. Listen, Marc-Andre Fleury for a long time was one of my favorites. It was always Crosby, and then it was usually Fleury. And when he left, I was very upset. I understood, but I was very upset. But I'm of the belief now that there should only be 5 names hanging in PPG Paints Arena until the next great comes along for Pittsburgh, which might not be for a while. That's Lemieux. That's Michel Briere. That's Jaromir Jagr, the 3 that are already up there. And I think they should be joined by Sidney Crosby and Evgeni Malkin. I think what Fleury and Letang have done for the city of Pittsburgh and the Penguins organization has been tremendous. But let's not act like there haven't been greats in this city before them. Let's not act like there haven't been players that have meant a lot to this city before them. I think that is a designation to get your number retired in Pittsburgh that should be reserved for the greatest of the greats. And that's Crosby, that's Malkin, and that's the 3 that are already up there, and Lemieux, Briere, and Jagr. Yeah,
and I will always see everyone's argument on it. I just disagree. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. In an election year, we should be the standard. You can disagree and not hate each other, but that's
no kidding.
It's the most political that we're going to get on this show. We're going to actually wrap it because we're getting too political on this show. That, and we're running out of things to say. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Tip of the Iceberg. Make sure you check out the watch along tonight. Penguins versus Minnesota Wild on Marc-Andre Fleury night. Will be live at Tip of the Iceberg on YouTube, so make sure you check us out there. But that's it for this one. Make sure you follow us on YouTube at Tip of the Iceberg. Like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Or You can find us anywhere you get your podcast from. We'll see you guys next time.